I'm currently building some sash windows and I need some corner or angle clamps to hold the frame square while it glues up. The best way to square up a sash frame is with a jig attached to the workbench and wedges, but my workbench isn't large enough to handle the windows I'm working on. Another possibility would be using a long clamp to pull it square, but I don't have a clamp long enough, and because of the shape of the frame this would actually be quite difficult anyway. This leaves me with corner clamps as my only real option, but that's okay, I've been meaning to make some for a while. Here I'm just cutting a couple of lengths of 50x50 stock to about 290mm. The exact length doesn't really matter, but it's a good idea to make it slightly less than 300mm, which is a common multiple size. Now that you have your two edge pieces, find the straightest face on each one. Don't worry if they aren't perfect, that will be fixed later. I just matched them up until they looked about right. I'm going to join the two pieces with a half lap joint because it's quick and simple. Another option would be a finger joint, but it would take longer to prepare for no or minimal gain. I'm not much of a fan of trench cutting on the miter saw as it's not very accurate, but in this situation it's about the fastest way to get a reasonable result. Using a combination of chisels and planes, take out the waste using the trench cuts as a guide. I like to take the material nearest the shoulder out first with the shoulder plane before flattening out the main joint area. Once you're done, check the fit. This isn't fine cabinetry, close is good enough. Find the centre of one piece and drill and countersink for a screw. Now's a good time to check for square. With a square of this size it's easy to get an inaccurate reading simply due to its unwieldiness. Notice that I press only on the back of the square to ensure it's properly seated. I use my hand under the opposite edge as contrast with the floor to look for gaps. It's not actually that important that your clamp is bang on square at this point, which is good because it turns out my square isn't actually square. Cut a strip of 12mm ply about 50mm wide and 400mm long. This will be the brace that holds the clamp square. Cutting a strip like this on the miter saw, especially from a small offcut, has to be done with care. Lie the brace on top of the clamp and screw down one end. Use your speed square to set the brace to 45 degrees and clamp it into place. Check for a square and if all looks good, screw down the other end. Next, dismantle the corner clamp and apply glue to all the mating surfaces. I considered lap jointing the brace into the corner clamp. or even using mortise and tenon, but both would have taken longer to make, and it turns out would have made the clamp less useful. As it is, the brace is out of the way, giving me a large amount of flexibility when using the clamp. Depending on how brave you're feeling depends on whether this step is optional for you. I'm going to use the mitre saw to square up the clamp, and there's a real danger that if the overhangs from the brace aren't cut off first, they'll fly off when they're cut free by the mitre saw. And here's where the magic happens. Put your best edge against the mitre saw fence and cut a thin sliver off the other face. Aim to cut the minimum necessary to make the face flat. Turn the piece over, clamp it down, and then trim the other face. This should leave you with a workpiece that's very close to 90 degrees and with flat and perpendicular faces. Take care when cutting the face that requires the brace to be down to the table, as the workpiece isn't as stable like this. I had to move my hold down clamps and take it steady. Trimming the corner off the clamp is a good idea for two reasons. Firstly, you don't want it catching on anything in the corner and not sitting correctly, and secondly, you'll be using this during glue ups and you don't want it getting glued into place by squeeze out. I first tested the clamps against my framing square, but I wasn't very impressed with how square they'd turned out. I later measured the framing square and found it was only 89.8 degrees. Good enough for framing I suppose, but not really for cabinet work. I wanted to try and find out why the clamps weren't square, so I placed them on the mitre saw bed, which is ground flat. The good news is that the two were identical. I then tested them with the angle finder to see if I could determine what was wrong. I first tested against the bed and then just around the corner of the clamp. Both readings were 90 degrees, sometimes showing 90.1. It was then that I realised that the framing square was what was wrong. I wasn't sure whether to trust the angle finder when I first got it, but it turns out it's incredibly accurate for such a cheap little device. Worth the money if you ever need to measure odd angles. Finally, I'll leave you with a shot of the clamps in action. I'm a bit short of clamps and I realised I could save a clamp in the middle by bridging across the two ends with a piece of scrap timber. If you have any thoughts on this or any of my videos, please leave a comment below and of course subscribe. Bye till next time.